What's going on out here? This is Sword Fan Chick back with another video. I know it's been a while since I made one, probably like a couple of months, probably like last year was the last time I made a video. You know, I've been really busy lately, been doing a lot, and you know, plus I don't really make videos unless I'm really passionate about a topic. So, because I am passionate about this topic, I am making a video about it. Mainly, especially because I've seen a lot of people talking about the backlash regarding Scarlett Johansson and her attempt to portray Dante Tex Gill, you know, the trans-masculine man, and Pug and Tug. And this is not the first time Scarlett Johansson has had backlash for trying to portray something out of her element. She also had backlash when she portrayed Monica Kusanagi, a.k.a. Mira Killian, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Mira Killian, who was the white shell of Monica Kusanagi in the Ghost in the Shell movie. And quite frankly, I wanted to make a video, not necessarily just about Scarlett Johansson, but about diversity in Hollywood in general and representation in Hollywood in general. And whitewashing, blackwashing, if you want to call it that, trans erasure, LGBTQ erasure, and the reason it's been such a major topic of controversy. So I wanted to talk about that so much. I wanted to bring in some definitions of what it is, and I wanted to give my perspective on whitewashing, blackwashing, LGBTQ erasure, and just kind of break down why I think also diversity and representation is important, but when done right. So, first, let me start by explaining what whitewashing is. Whitewashing is when a white person is cast to portray a character that was another race in the original source material. Or, whitewashing can also involve casting a white person to play a person of color, whether real or fiction. Some call this race bending. Some call this blackface, yellowface, redface, however you want to put it. Regardless, it's all under the whitewashing bracket. Now, LGBTQ erasure is when a cis or straight person is cast to play an LGBTQ person instead of an LGBTQ person. Now, there is a difference between whitewashing and trans erasure or LGBTQ erasure, but I'll get into that later. And I also want to discuss blackwashing as well and what my thoughts are on black people playing originally white characters. But first, I want to talk about whitewashing and why it's such a big deal to some people, including me. So first, let me explain why whitewashing has been a problem in Hollywood for a long time. Let me get into the history. When Hollywood cinema was first made, black people had been historically barred from being portrayed in movies lawfully. So there was a history behind whitewashing that goes back to lawful segregation. Some might say, you know, well, white people made Hollywood, so shouldn't they have been allowed to bar black people from it? And while that's true that they made Hollywood and they did have the power to do what they pleased with it, it was just very hypocritical because white people had no problem borrowing things from black created forms of art, such as black styles of music, like jazz, swing, rock and roll, etc., even to the point of not giving us credit for it. So, typically, they just didn't treat us fairly. They borrowed us from their creative freedom, from their creations, but they wanted to get all up in ours. But I digress. Going back to cinema. Sadly, when we did get roles, the only ones we would have were as servants or uneducated black people. Like in the case with Hattie McDaniel. She was the first African American to ever win an Oscar. And she got to attend the ceremony, the Oscar ceremony, where blacks were typically barred. Okay, they had a strict no black policy at the Oscars. Okay, so she was the first, or at least one of the first ever black people to be able to even attend the ceremony. And yet the role that she got an Oscar for was as a slave woman. A lawyer one at that. She was in a subservient role. Of course, that was still a step up in comparison to the late 1800s and early 1900s. In the late 1800s and 1900s, white people would portray us instead, using blackface. And they would do it in the most stereotypical and disgusting manner. While one would say it was simply humor, it was also satire used in a way to demean us. This was one of the earliest examples of poor representation by Hollywood and whitewashing. The same was also done to those of Asian or Native American background, as white people would often portray them and usually with really damaging stereotypes. So as you can see, America has a nasty history with whitewashing, poor representation, and only giving minorities roles that represent us in a negative light. So, going back to today, let's flash forward to today. I can honestly say that much has changed since back then, okay? There has been progress made. You know, we have more black actors that have won Oscars, that have gotten lead roles, especially thanks to the 1980s and 1990s, which was one of the best times, I think, for black actors and other minorities. You know, I can't say the same for Native Americans, but we'll talk about that later. This representation in the 90s was really good for black people because we got plenty of chances to showcase our acting talent and gain notoriety for it. You know, it affected how we were treated in Hollywood, with some black people being among the first to win Oscars in history. And more black people were becoming millionaires just like their white counterparts as actors and performers. However, it does seem that after the 21st century started, a lot of the progress we made had regressed, particularly for Asians and for Hispanics. Well, Hispanics has risen, but for Asians and Native Americans, that's where it has gotten the most regressive. And that's really unfortunate. But I'll get into more about that. But for Hispanics, it has gotten better. And that's mainly due to the fact that Hispanics coming into the country can be white or black. Hispanics have more of an ambiguous race where they can range between either one of them. And so landing roles for them is just a tad bit easier for that reason. But that's up for controversy, I'm sure. And we can discuss that later in the video or at another day. Anyway, I want to make clear that I'm not personally against white adaptations of stories in every way, just like I'm not against black adaptations. I love The Wiz and I love The Rain, okay? Especially, I'm not against adaptations if they were made in the past. You know, things in the past were different. You know, black people were not as prevalent in media due to racism, so black adaptations of things were sometimes necessary. When The Ring came out, you know, it was an all-white American adaptation of something Japanese. But if you think about it, we hadn't really had many American adaptations of Japanese media back then. It was really one of the first of its kind. So you can't really slight it for having mostly majority white cast at a time when they didn't really have that many foreign films being adapted into American media anyway. And the same with movies about trans women. You know, there were several actors, male actors, that won Oscars for portraying trans women. I think considering that there wasn't much understanding of what trans people were at that time, it really was a good start. However, in the modern world, where there are more minorities in the USA than ever before, and with more knowledge about these groups, I think we should be past the point where we need white adaptation or black adaptation of any type of story. You know, especially when it comes to the first live adaptation made in the modern world. You know, back then, like I said, live adaptations, they were the first of their kind in a time when diversity wasn't really prevalent. And in fact, in the 1980s, you know, white people made up 80% of the population. There weren't as many Asians or as many Hispanics or as many trans people and gay people out in the public. So this was more natural for it to have those types of adaptations back in the day. However, like I said, we're living in a modern world where there are more minorities in the USA than ever before. And we also have more knowledge about these groups. Like, so why are we still having black adaptations of things, or black adaptation of a character, or white adaptation of a character? And my main concern is that, especially when it comes to the very first live adaptation of a story, I think it should always be the closest to the source material, because the first is always the most memorable and impactful, you know. And the reason why sticking to the source material for first adaptations is not just because of whitewashing, but because as a fan of something, I get really disappointed when the movie butchers my favorite story, okay? And a lot of times when they whitewash or blackwash a character, that character's race might have added something to the story that was very important. And so I feel kind of disappointed when they butcher that aspect of it. And I think a lot of fans feel disappointed when you butcher the source material in the movies. And I mean, I don't expect movies to be 100% like the original source material. But the main important aspects of the source material should definitely be in a live adaptation. Otherwise, what purpose would there be in having a live adaptation if you're not going to bring anything to life? Okay? That's the whole purpose. Now, if we're talking about why live adaptations are important for diversity, one of the reasons why sticking to the source material will be good, is probably the best thing for diversity of representation, is because it ensures that everyone gets a chance to play roles that are best suited for them. And it will also give everyone a chance to be represented in the right way without distortion, and it will bring diversity without forcing anything. You get what I'm saying? So that's just plain and simple. Then once the first live adaptation is made, once that first live adaptation is made and it's the truest to the original story, then usually I don't care if others follow, okay? Whether it's a white or black. But as long as that first one is the best, it's got to be the best and the closest to the source material. Because that's the one everybody's going to go see, all right? And going back to us living in the modern world, I think we are living in a time where we should be evolving to make sure that all people are equally represented in the movie without having to change the entire character or cast just so we can have representation. We should be, as black people, getting roles suited for us, or people of color should be getting roles suited for us. I don't think it's ideal to be handed the rip-off black version of movies or the rip-off black version of a white character, okay? It was necessary back then because of our limited opportunities, but now I feel like we no longer need to accept those hand-me-downs, and with internet, there's so many ways to even be your own director and producer, where you don't have to accept the hand-me-downs and the knockoff characters and knockoff movies. We can be producing our own material, and even if you are going for a role, why go for a knockoff version of a white character? Because 9 times out of 10, most people, what character are they going to like? Your portrayal or the white version? The white version. They're going to report back to the original source material. At the end of the day, the original source material is what most fans are interested in, not your portrayal of that character. So it really doesn't do much for you as a black actor, okay? It really just puts you in a competition against the original white character. And at the end of the day, the white character is going to be preferred, okay? Especially because it was the original. So that's why with the whole blackwashing thing, accepting hand-me-downs and the knockoffs is not a good thing, okay? And if a story is about us, we should be going for those roles and we should be accepted those opportunities, okay? Why should we not star in a movie that's about us? I'm equally against whitewashing for that reason, okay? So, let's get back to representation and why it is important. I want to talk about why representation and diversity is so important in Hollywood. And there's a lot of people who don't think it is, and they'll say you should be able to relate to any person of any race. But the problem with that sentiment is that oftentimes what you see about a race becomes your perception about that race. And that's why I'm going to list the reasons why I think representation is important. Number one, it inspires our own children, okay? That means the people of color that are children. In fact, media has always been the main inspiration behind children's thoughts and dreams for the future. And if children don't see their demographic being represented as actors, they won't believe they can do it. I mean, think about it. So many young black males want to be rappers and athletes. Why do you think that's so? It's because the only type of representation they see of black men is as rappers or athletes. But if we could show them that more was possible, if we portrayed more black people, more of a positive light, or in more than one light, our children be able to see that more is possible. Okay? Sometimes seeing is believing, especially when it comes to children. You might not think representation is important to children, but it really is. When they see a person that looks just like them doing it, they're like, wow, that person is Black, Asian, Native American, and they're doing it. That means it's possible for me to do it too. And I know a lot of white people don't see that because they never experienced it. But you have to understand that most white people have been portrayed in all facets of life. So when you ask a white child what they want to be when they grow up, they're going to mention pretty much every field in the world because they've seen it being done. Whereas Black people, Black children, and children of other races, they don't often see other things outside of a limited perspective. And that has a lot to do with media, okay? Media has the biggest impression on children, even more than parental guidance, unfortunately. I mean, that's a fact, okay? That's a literal fact. So it is important if we have good representation and representation in media to show children what the possibilities could be for them. The second reason why representation is important, and I think this is even more important than my first point, is it influences how the world views minorities, okay? Not just being visible, but also having positive representation. For example, people in other countries, when they think of Black American people, they mostly think of hip-hop stars, thugs, or ghettos. In other words, most of them don't have a positive view of Black people. They view us as mostly criminals. And this view of Black people affects the way they treat us. And this is also the same with the way Africans are portrayed in media, affect how they're viewed to people in the other world, in the other countries, or other continents. And even before Black Panther, like, if you think about it, Black Panther is probably the only movie that has had the greatest portrayal of African people. Most portrayals before then were pretty bad, with Africans being portrayed as poor, starving, and traditional tribes with animalistic behavior. So naturally, when most people in other countries see us, they either look down on us or run away from us because their only understanding of people from another country is through media, which most times is American media. So if their only other understanding of another country is through media, what do you think their view of Black people will be? If you think about it, when you think about our portrayals in media, what do you think the first thing will come to their mind? And this just doesn't go for Black people either. Asians are also portrayed really poorly in American media, especially Asian men. And that has a lot to do with why they are considered less desirable, because in American media, they often portray them as unattractive, nerdy, kung fu fighters, which kung fu usually appeals to the nerd demographic in itself. So it's just, they're not portrayed in the most appealing light. I mean, if it wasn't for K-pop, which is starting to become very popular in America, we wouldn't see really good portrayals of Asian men at all. And the ones who really get cheated in American media are Native American people. I can't tell you how many times people have told me they didn't know Native American people were real. Okay, there are people that think Native American people are out of a fiction, fantasy, fairy tale book. And then when there are portrayals of Native Americans, they aren't really good representations of them. You have white people portraying Native Americans, seemingly mockingly so, their culture and their language with so much disrespect. Like, look at the Lone Ranger. Come on. It's just really bad. It's sad. And you really don't have a lot of movies portraying modern Native Americans, especially, even though most Native Americans live like me or you. But I guess we'll wait till 2050 to get to that point. Anyway, let's address some of the arguments used by skeptics. There are a lot of people who are skeptical that whitewashing exists. And I've heard a lot of these arguments from these people about why they don't think whitewashing exists. And I just want to address some of the viewpoints that I've heard particularly. So, let's start with the first argument. A lot of skeptics of whitewashing will say, oh, who cares if the person is Black, white, trans, this, as long as they can act, After all, acting requires you to play someone you're not. Now, this is one of the more dismissive statements where a person is immediately trying to bring you back to the job an actor is supposed to be doing. And to this argument, I agree that the actor's job is to act as the characters as much as they possibly can. But this argument seems to only focus on the actors when the actors really aren't the ones who have anything to do with whitewashing. The actors are merely a part of the game that is being played. Really, the ones to blame for it are the producers, the directors, them combined. They're the ones choosing to portray this role in this way. While they can do as they wish, it's their movie, I'm not saying that they should be barred lawfully from doing what they want to do, but that also means that I can choose not to support it. And I can also give my opinion of how I don't like the way it's being portrayed. As I've said before, the whole purpose of making a movie is to bring it to life, okay? To bring things to life. And if you're making a live action adaptation of a book or a story, for example, normally people are going to see this movie in the hopes that they will see the live action movie adapt to the original source material, okay? That's why they call it an adaptation, okay? I don't go to a live action adaptation to see it be a totally different story. I go to see the live adaptation because I want to see the story that I love so much come to life, okay? And I'm not saying adaptations, I'm not saying they'll be 100% like the source material, okay? I'm not saying that I expect that. Because oftentimes material has to be cut and other things added to get straight to the point. Because, movies not as long as sometimes the source material. However, usually when people are going to see a movie based on something, they're looking for the movie to be as much like the source material as possible. Okay? Otherwise, why should us as fans waste our money to see an adaptation that's not really an adaptation? Okay? I don't like retellings of anything. I don't really like remade versions. I prefer adaptations when there's an original story involved, okay? And again, I don't mind seeing a white version of Black Panther at another date. A white version that's inspired or whatever, but at least the first adaptation needs to be the most like the original, especially if we're talking about the modern era. And guess what? In my opinion, blackwashing is not necessarily the answer to this either. In fact, I think it can be equally as cringy to ham-fist a black person in a role that was originally supposed to be white, especially as the first adaptation. Blackwashing, as they call it, blackwashing, usually happens when Hollywood directors want diversity, but the lead characters are mostly white, so they change one of the sidekick characters black to seem like there's diversity. Very few blackwashing cases are like the modern Annie. While I commend any effort to add diversity, why not just cast black actors or black actors as black characters or Asian actors as Asian characters, okay? Why not just cast them in black or Asian roles? I mean, it's a lot less awkward and cringy when you do it that way than when you try to force an actor to look like the original. Trying to force a white person to look and act like a black person, or trying to force a black person to look and act like a white person, it's not even possible, especially on the looks department, okay? And yes, I'm aware that people portray monsters that they don't resemble all the time, too. However, when we're talking about race, we're talking about people that actually exist, okay? Furthermore, even with monsters, if a monster is supposed to be a fire elemental and is described as red in the original, I wouldn't be happy if they turned him blue or purple for standout purposes, especially if his skin color had significance to the original story. It's the same when a character is a specific race. In most stories that have a race of characters, the race oftentimes has significance because it's connected to the original character's history, personality, interests, and culture. When you change that aspect of a character, sometimes it can alter the entire story. In the modern world, we shouldn't even have to whitewash or blackwash, as I've said over and over again. And that's one thing I want to really, really focus on. My concern with blackwashing is that it will be used as a way to discredit those who speak up about whitewashing, making those of us who don't like whitewashing in the modern era look like hypocrites. And it will be taken less seriously when you accept blackwashing as the norm. This is why I'm so against it in the modern era. It was fine for back then, yes, because we lived in a time where we didn't have as many opportunities, and, you know, we were just coming away from the racist laws that were restricting us. But we're at a time now where there's a lot more of us. We should not be accepting those knockoff hand-me-downs. I'm sorry. And it actually hurts our stance when we take these blackwashing roles. It's ridiculous. And I'm even more against whitewashing and blackwashing, especially when it comes to actual historical figures. Oh my God. And this also goes for LGBTQ erasure. You know, it's one thing to whitewash and blackwash characters that are fictional. You know, in fiction, you can easily change a character in the source material, you know, to fit whatever you want it to fit. So whitewashing and blackwashing when it comes to fiction is not a cause for me to petition. Okay, it's not a cause. I'm just not, I wouldn't support it because I'm personally a fan of things that stick to the source material, but I'm not going to sit here and petition it because it's fiction. But when companies whitewash or blackwash or even use trans erasure for actual historical figures, that's a major problem. For example, recently, BBC made a series about Achilles, and they blackwashed him so bad I almost threw up. I mean, this is an example of when blackwashing goes wrong. I know Achilles is more so of a legend than he is necessarily a historical figure. Whether he has any real backings in history is still up for debate. But regardless, this is a story based on an actual event that took place. Okay? And I doubt that Achilles was black. He was described as blonde with blue eyes. And yet you cast him as a black person. I mean, this is an example of when blackwashing goes wrong. Okay? It would be different if this black character was in another story based on Greece. You know, there are some dark-skinned characters in Greek literature and mythology, but Achilles is most certainly not one of them. Okay? This is what I call bad representation for us. It makes us look desperate. It makes us look like knockoffs. We are portraying ourselves as a part of European culture and history, a culture and history that actually never had anything to do with us as black people. And in some cases, that culture and history didn't treat us black people too well. Okay? We really need to do better. And blackwashing is not the way. I'm sorry. Especially not when it comes to history. Another good example is the movie Gods of Egypt. Now, this is an example of when there's whitewashing involved. Okay? This movie was about Egyptians. And I'm not saying that Egyptians were black, because, you know, whether or not Egyptians were black is still controversial, even among researchers. But researchers will also tell you that the Egyptians were most certainly not white. Okay? There is evidence to prove that they were not black nor white. So here's an idea. Why did you guys just hire actual Egyptians to play in these movies? Or actual people from the Middle Eastern border? They're more than likely to look the closest to what Egyptians in the ancient world would have looked like. And plus, it is a part of their ancestral history. Not white people's. Anyway, moving on. The second argument. That skeptics of whitewashing, and I know seem to have gotten way off topic, but it's that first one that really, really got to me. But this is the second argument that skeptics tend to bring up a lot. So if white cis people can only play white cis people, then only policemen can act as policemen. So we should just only hire policemen to play policemen, right? This is also a very dumb statement, in my opinion, because you're basically comparing apples and oranges. Being a police officer is a job title. Being black or trans is not. It describes a group of people based on specific characteristics, and in the black person's case, physical characteristics. Next case, I shouldn't even have to say more than that. The third argument that skeptics of whitewashing tend to bring up. America is a white cis majority country. Would we ask Japan to represent a minority when they are the majority? Again, another example of comparing apples and oranges. First of all, let's focus on the statistical mathematical viewpoint of this. There is a difference between a race majority and a race predominantly. Predominantly means mostly. Majority means the greater number than half of a total, even if it's only slightly greater. Okay? I know this is hard for some to understand, but there is a difference. Japan has predominantly Japanese people. In America, white people are the majority, meaning they're the largest group. But the country of America is not predominantly white. First of all, let's compare the demographic of a country like Japan. The population. In Japan, there are approximately 127 million people, while in America there are approximately 326 million people. Okay? Now, in Japan, out of 127 million people, Japanese people make up 98.5% of that population. That means their country is predominantly Japanese. So no, most people of color would not expect Japanese people to portray us in their country because, quite frankly, black people make up less than 1% of that country. Okay? And foreigners in general in Japan only make up 1.5% of the population. And people of other races, other than white, usually make up less than that. You know, they make up less than 230,000 people in Japan. And that's a stark contrast when we compare it to America. Non-Hispanic white people make up only 60% of the population. Okay? As of 2017. And experts all agree that that percentage will drop further and further. In fact, it already has. Among children 5 and younger, only 50% are white. That means that generation of children is already no longer the majority. And I'm not saying that to scare white people. I don't think it's scary to be 50% of America. Okay? But this is just to show you the reality of what the situation is in America. Okay? 5 and younger. Kids 5 and younger. The majority of kids 5 and younger that are white only make up 50%. White kids 5 and younger, 50%. Minority kids 5 and younger, 50%. So we really need to start considering that America is a very diverse place. And even now, like, if we look at America as a whole, you know, black people, we're a minority in America. We are the minority. But do you realize that there are more black people in America than there are white people in Denmark and the Netherlands? Okay? I mean, our population percentage is as close to the entire population of England. We're about as close. And Hispanics, there are more Hispanics here than there are black people as of 2017. Overall, ethnic minorities make up 40% of the population in an already larger population compared to Japan. Okay? There are millions of black people, millions of Hispanics. There's even millions of Asians. 17,320,856 to be exact. Okay? There are millions of people that are not white in comparison to Japan, which only has a few hundreds. Okay? Again, America's a big country with millions of people of other races. And I can't stress that enough. And so the most accurate portrayal of America is as a melting pot. That's the most adequate and accurate representation of America. As much as you don't like to hear it, don't like to see it, that is the most adequate representation of America. The least adequate is to show America as an only white country, because it's not. And it's not even a predominantly white country. So we need to get past that understanding, that mentality. Next case. This is the fourth argument used by skeptics. Skeptics of whitewashing. There aren't a lot of people from that population. There aren't a lot of Native Americans. There aren't a lot of Asians. There aren't a lot of trans people in the USA. So, of course, they will get casted in the role. I find that very interesting, especially considering that they think this is a good argument. And it would seem like a good argument to some that truly believe that every actor in Hollywood was an American-born citizen. But for those of you who at least do a little research on your faves, you'll see that many of these white actors themselves are not American-born. So the suggestion that there weren't enough black people to cast in America is absolute bull, because they easily cast outside of the United States for white characters. Why can't they cast outside the United States for black characters or people of color? Out of billions in the world, you mean to tell me there was absolutely no chance that at least one of them could get a role? I don't buy that. And again, going back to what I said previously in the third argument, you should know that there are millions of us in America alone. Just because we're a minority doesn't mean there are very little of us. Do the math, people. Do the math. Of course, this argument is mostly used to overlook why Hollywood doesn't cast LGBTQ people to play LGBTQ roles, particularly trans people. You know, I get it. Much of the world is Christian, and, you know, therefore LGBTQ roles are hard to find because Christian makes up most of the world, and they tend to get in their feelings when they see LGBTQ characters, especially in media. However, my concern is when you actually do make a movie about an LGBTQ person, why not cast an LGBTQ person in that role? I'm specifically talking on trans people. And before y'all throw out that argument, there aren't a lot of them. There are less dwarves in the USA. And yet you guys managed to find them to play their own roles. So what's the real deal? That is an excuse to me for laziness on producers and directors' part. If you can make a movie about trans people, then you can cast trans people in the role. Just like you can make a movie with dwarves in them, you know, little people, and you can cast those dwarves and little people in those roles. Enough said. The fifth argument that skeptics use against whitewashing. Well, that person didn't get that role because of whitewashing. They got that role because they have more star power. This is surprisingly one of the truest reasons why Hollywood is probably casting white people. Because there are simply more A-list actors that happen to be white. And naturally, that's so because in the past, white people were more than likely to be cast. They were able to build that resume as type actors. But guess what? Unfortunately, that means that this leaves no room for actors of colors to be up and coming in a role. What we end up having is a continuation of the past. Whites mostly cinema. Yet this is also why Hollywood is continuing to lose momentum to Netflix and other streaming services. Because they still believe that star power drives a movie. And the fact that they still believe that star power will draw people to a movie has already proven that it actually doesn't work. And you people who are overlooking this are overlooking many of the examples. For example, ScarJo, her role in Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell was a flop, okay? Yet she's some kind of an A-list actor. So that should be proof that A-list actors do not draw in movies. Brand names do, you know. If a movie has a brand name, it's more than likely to draw in people. But A-list actors, not so much. Not anymore. And if Hollywood keeps thinking this is true, they're going to continue to see sale drops at the cinemas. The key to knowing what will sell is knowing what people want, but also keeping in mind growing needs. You know, see, most movies are made at least 2 or 3 years before it's released, which means what was in trend then may not be in trend later. So, you probably think I'm just saying movie producers need to be psychic. But I'm not saying they do. I'm saying they need to see what has not been produced already, recognize what the people really want to see that they have never seen, and do something original while still keeping in mind who your target demographic is. This requires producers to be more in tune with what's going on in the world. Simple as that. Be in tune. and be on top of the growing trends as well. But when it comes to book adaptations and other story adaptations, the best thing to do is not butcher up a book or original source by butchering up the movie with things that didn't take place in the story. And again, I know things won't be exactly like their original stories, but when you butcher the movie so much that you can't even tell what this movie is based off of, that will disappoint fans. And you know, fans of source material tend to be very critical, okay? They want to see their stories come to life. And so when you butcher it up in a movie, what do you expect? Okay? And the thing is, it's funny because these producers don't seem to look at the pattern. They don't seem to look at the pattern. If you notice, most of the movies with whitewashing have always flopped. Okay? Pay attention. If they're all doing it and failing, why don't you just, I don't know, do the opposite? If everyone is falling off a cliff, don't fall off with them. Follow the patterns of those succeeding, not losing. Anyway, the sixth argument by skeptics. Maybe they got the role because they were the best. You know, ScarJo just may have been the best out of all the people that went out for the role. I have a problem with this suggestion because you're basically saying that of all the people they could have cast from every race, all the white people in all these situations were simply better than the people of color. That can't possibly be the case every time. I'm sorry, I don't buy that at all. More than likely, when a white person is cast in the role of a person of color, it's because they were either preferred because of star power or because they were more marketable, not because they were better actors. Which brings me to the most reasonable argument that skeptics bring into the equation. This group, cis, straight, white people, is just simply more marketable. Now, there are skeptics who say this, and to me, this is the most honest and reasonable argument that people have presented. And it's one that I agree with because I know that racial preferences exist in the world, that racism and colorism exist in the world. I mean, look at India, for example, where lighter skin is almost always preferred in Bollywood movies. You know, even in the USA, if you look about black women, darker skinned black women are less likely to get roles than light skinned black women. So white is right, light is close, and that is the truth. However, I do think that this is not the only thing that makes a marketable movie. And I think if a person of color is portrayed in a more marketable way, they will gain more marketability in future titles. Take the Black Panther, for example. While that is simply one movie and it did have the Marvel backing behind it, the movie's main attractor was the fact that it was different and original, in a location that movies hardly ever take place in. A fictional African continent, or country, I should say. And see, there are ways to make movies more marketable. Just like that, you simply need to hire a good marketing team who will do it. And looking at the trends of today, people are actually looking for movies with more diversity. I mean, look at how many people went out to see Wonder Woman. You know, it used to be a time they said we never made a Wonder Woman movie because it wouldn't be marketable. But see, now they released it, and it's probably the most popular DC movie that's been released in this decade. So this is why, you know, movies with diversity are winning. Like Disney, this is why Disney's winning, if you really want to know. Not just because Disney's a household name, even though Disney, you know, is a household name, but Disney has had its fall from grace at one time. But Disney is winning now because it's giving the demographic everything that it wants. It's giving the people what they want. And that is well-known classics as well as a lot of diversity. Netflix is also winning for the same reason. Again, you all could learn a lot from the winners. So, I talked a lot about why I think representation is important, why I'm against blackwashing, why I'm against whitewashing, why I think diversity is important, yada, yada, yada. Now, I know I'm going to get off into something else. I want to compare whitewashing with trans LGBTQ erasure because there is a difference, okay? There is a difference, and I want to make it clear why. First off, race is mostly about skin color, okay? Phenotype. It's not something you can simply act as. You know, it's a physical appearance. It's about the physical appearance, mostly. So when you replace a person of color with a white person, or replace a white person with a person of color, it's very obvious, okay? The only way to do this is to completely change the original character's race, which is, in most cases, the character becomes white, okay? For what it's worth, this is the difference, because with trans people could, if they look the part, they could easily pass as cis, okay? There are a lot of trans people that can pass as cis, and they just swoop down and get a cis role without question. And some cis people could easily pass as trans, okay? Same with other LGBTQ individuals. I mean, a gay person could easily pass as straight, and a straight person could easily pass as gay, okay? Because most of the things regarding the LGBTQ community are not physical necessarily. Whereas black people can't simply pass as white, and white people can't simply pass as black. So this type of representation is very different, okay? When it comes to LGBTQ, again, like I said, it can't be defined by physical characteristics. It's mostly defined by feelings and actions. So this means that trans erasure, something like trans erasure, would be a little different than whitewashing. Because transness is not always evident, okay? Almost anyone can be trans, even if we don't know it. For all we know, Scarlett Johansson could be trans. She may come out one day as trans. And then would we be protesting then? Would we be up in arms then? You get what I'm saying? So LGBTQ people, again, cannot simply be defined by looks alone. And that's why when it comes to LGBTQ representation, it's important that we separate it from whitewashing. LGBTQ representation, because of its vagueness, means that pretty much these type of roles can somewhat be played by any type of person with varying identities. You know, like, for example, I think if we're going to portray a trans person, pre-transition, let's use an example. Like, let's think about a pre-transition trans man. Would a post-trans man be able to play a pre-transition trans man? You know, pre-transition trans men look very different from post-transition trans men, okay? You know, the ones on hormone therapy don't look pre-transition. So in this case, the best way to portray them would be using a cis woman, okay? That would be the only logical way to show that. But again, I do understand. I understand why trans people don't like cis people portraying them. I can understand why they're skeptical of it. Because there are some issues with cis people playing trans people. And it goes back to the fact that sometimes cis people might give a poor representation of trans people. I honestly believe that when they casted Scarlett Johansson for Dante, most people were afraid of what kind of image Scarlett Johansson would give trans people. I mean, Scarlett Johansson is considered one of the babes of Hollywood. This is her reputation. Even trans men probably think she's really hot, I'm sure. But that's just it. She's a hot woman. You know, she's got curves. She's a hot, voluptuous woman. Can you imagine someone casting her to play you as a man? Let's say producers were doing a Blair White movie, and they decided to cast a cis man to play her. A man, in general, to play her. Do you think that would be appropriate representation for Blair White? I mean, he should at least have some femininity about him. I wouldn't expect him to look like Brock Lesnar. You know, that's the same with Dante Tex Gill. You can't just cast any old type of person to play Dante. You know? Because Dante identified as a man. So at least cast a manly-looking woman. I mean, come on. Sometimes when you get cis people to portray these roles, they tend to distort the image of trans people, portraying them as merely women in men's clothing or men in women's clothing. I'm not saying this is the case for all, but in many cases it does paint a distorted picture of trans people that could invalidate their identity. It could affect the way they're treated. Okay? So they deserve to be represented in the right way, like everyone else. Also, when cis people are accepted for these roles, you know, it does kind of interfere with trans people's chances of getting the role. And they already don't get a lot of roles as it is. So when they have a chance to play a role, I mean, why give it to a cis person? Just give it to a trans person. They understand the role more. So I think it would be better for them to portray the role, especially because they won't do it in a way that is disrespectful or invalidating. Now, I do have my criticisms of the trans community, though, because I find a lot of them to be hypocritical. A lot of them, I can understand why they don't want cis people to play them, because, you know, they're afraid of how cis people will portray them, and they don't want to be portrayed negatively. But then I find it ironic because a lot of trans people have no problem going for roles about cis people. You know, in my opinion, if a cis person can't play a trans person, then a trans person shouldn't be allowed to play a cis person. I mean, a trans woman can't necessarily understand me as a cis woman no more than I can understand her. And a lot of times when you don't really understand the character you're playing, you tend to misrepresent them. Okay? And I don't want to be misrepresented. But then again, when I think about this, cis heterosexual identity and LGBTQ identity is not necessarily defined by something physical, but more so by behavior and mental disposition. So pretty much anyone can be LGBTQ or cis heterosexual, even if we can't physically see it. And so in this case, I don't think it's necessarily bad to have a cis person in a trans role or a trans person in a cis role, so long as we get people who can portray us in the appropriate manner. And as long as trans people are given the same opportunity to play cis people as we are trans people, which in most cases, it's not like that. So I think the solution is to simply be more open to casting LGBTQ people and removing the stigma, especially on trans people portraying certain roles. And with that, I think it will be more open if we can do it that way. Because otherwise, there is no real solution behind it that wouldn't limit the opportunities of trans people. You know, because if trans people really start to say, I don't want cis people playing trans people, then that would also mean that they will not be given or should not be given the opportunity to play roles as us cis people. And I know that when that happens, it'll only further limit trans people's opportunities because most roles in the world are cis. So I think trans people definitely have a right to be picky about who is portraying them in Hollywood, but they should also be reasonable and sensible as well, due to the fact that transgenderism is such a broad term, encompassing all types of people. So the only real solutions would be for Hollywood to be more open to casting LGBTQ people in the future. I mean, that's the only solution. I mean, I'd really like to hear more from the trans community on this. I want to be able to defend trans people a little better, but I've hardly come across any good points other than trans people would have less jobs if cis people took them in Hollywood. They already have less jobs, and if there's a trans role, it's an opportunity for trans people to get that job opportunity. But when cis people are given the job opportunity, it's just one less opportunity for trans people. So I think that's one good point. And then another one of the good points is trans people don't want to be misrepresented unfairly and inappropriately. So I mean, trans people would be the best person to represent themselves. But it would be great to have more points to add to this argument. But because I'm not trans, you know, I think trans people could speak better for themselves. But I do still think that we should be opening up our doors to having trans people playing in their own roles and giving out opportunities for trans people, you know. But at the same time, we shouldn't limit cis people from playing trans people, just like we don't limit trans people from playing cis people, okay? I just think that we just need to be more open to casting LGBTQ people, which unfortunately, because of stigma, a lot of producers aren't. Well, that's all I wanted to say on this topic. This is my take on diversity and representation in Hollywood. Let me know what you guys think about this, whether you agree or disagree. The people with the most legit comments and arguments, whether you agree or disagree, will get pinned. Okay, I really want an open discussion. I want to really hear feedback. I want people to tell me what they think would be the best argument for whitewashing or against whitewashing, and maybe we can have a discussion. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.